and welcome to Pesach Crash Course Part 2. Today is Tuesday, and it's March 23rd, and we're doing the second of a 3-part crash course on Pesach. I'd like to start off this morning with a beautiful story. I'd like to start this morning with a beautiful story of the Baal Shem Tov. When the Baal Shem Tov was alive, obviously in the 1700s, he very, very much wanted and desired to go up to Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel. And at one point in his life, he decided to do so with his daughter Odel. So together with his daughter Odel, they got into a ship and they traveled towards the Holy Land. Good morning, Terry. Nice to see you. So there they are, they're traveling towards the Holy Land, the Baal Shem Tov and his daughter. And they stay, the ship, I guess, docks in Istanbul, Constantinople of those days. And for whatever reason, all sorts of mishaps and catastrophes prevented him from actually reaching to the Holy Land. At one point, it came Pesach, and they were stuck in Constantinople in Istanbul with it being Pesach that evening. The Baal Shem Tov had zero provisions for Pesach. No matzah, no wine, no bitter herbs, nothing. His daughter looks at him and she says, "What are we going to do for the Seder?" And he says, "Hashem will provide. It's going to be okay." And with that, he goes to shul. The Baal Shem Tov goes to shul. While he's at shul, his daughter is, staying in whatever place they were staying. There's a knock on the door. A couple comes over. And they say, "We're looking for Rabbi Yisrael ben Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yisrael, the son of Rabbi Eliezer, the Baal Shem Tov." And she says, "It's my father. This is where he's going to, this is where he's staying." They said that so they said to the daughter, "We would very much love to spend the holiday of Pesach together with Rabbi Yisrael, with the Baal Shem Tov, and we have all the provisions. We have wine and matzah and food and everything. We just would love to spend it together with him. We have food for all of us." So the daughter was so excited. She said, "This is amazing." They agreed. They made a deal. They sorted it out. And by the time the Baal Shem Tov came back from shul that night, the eve of Pesach, he comes to where they were staying. There's a table laden with all the beautiful details of the Pesach Seder, which we're going to be discussing in a few moments in this part 2 of the Pesach Seder. And they have the most beautiful spiritual Seder. The Baal Shem Tov, his daughter, and his husband and wife. After the meal, the Baal Shem Tov turns to his guests, or perhaps his hosts, and he says to them, "I know that you're childless, and I would love to be able to bless you with a child in gratitude for everything that you've done for us." Good morning, Daniel. Good morning, Howard, Susan. Nice to see Howard, Susan. I think it's the first time you're here with us. So Susan, Howard. And the Baal Shem Tov says, "I want to bless you with a son. A year from now, you'll be holding a son. You'll be holding a child, the fulfillment of your dreams." As soon as the Baal Shem Tov had said this, a commotion breaks out in heaven. Because in heaven, it was already decreed that there was no possibility whatsoever for this couple to have a child. How dare the Baal Shem Tov have the audacity to announce that this couple will have a child, and it was automatically decreed that since the Baal Shem Tov had the audacity to make this declaration, and since God is obligated to fulfill the will of those who fear him, the oath of the Baal Shem Tov has to be filled, but there will be a price to pay. The price that will be paid will be that the Baal Shem Tov will have to forfeit his portion in the world to come, his portion in heaven, his spiritual reward for all of his achievements in this world, so that this couple will be able to have their child. And the Baal Shem Tov was thus informed of this conclusion in the spiritual realms. As soon as he heard about this, the Baal Shem Tov's face lit up with joy, and he declared, "How fortunate am I! I have just learned that I have forfeited all of my heavenly reward, and therefore I have no reward, I have no fortune waiting for me in the next world. I am thrilled to hear this. Why? Because this means that all of my divine service from this point on is without ulterior motive. All of my divine service is pure and focused only on Hashem, on the object of my love, not on myself. As soon as the Baal Shem Tov made this declaration, it was revealed to the Baal Shem Tov that because of his desire to serve God so purely with no ulterior motive, his portion in the world to come had been restored. So that's quite an amazing heavenly story about how things work upstairs. But the reason I'm sharing it with you is because as we come to Pesach, it's perhaps one of the more spiritual experiences of our lives. We're about to go into the Pesach Crash Course Part 2, and we're going to be learning about some very spiritual experiences that we do with food, with wine, with drink, with our mannerisms, with our speech. And much of our spirituality is focused on ourselves. Is what, in general, we live our lives in a way that what somebody told me it's called whiffim. What's in it for me? What's in it for me? Everything that we do, we want to know what's in it for me. But the Baal Shem Tov teaches us about doing something for the sake of purity, for the sake of no ulterior motive. When you do something for someone that you love, you don't think, well, I'm going to take the garbage out so that my wife will do this, that, or the other for me. You don't do it. A mature person doesn't do that. You do something for your wife, for your husband, because you love them. You love them for the sake of them, not for the sake of what they are going to do for you. That's pure love. And as we develop our relationship with God as well, we're striving for the same ideal, to be able to love and serve God, not because of what God can do for me, but because I love God and because I revere and respect God. In the words of JFK, ask not what America can do for you, but what you can do for America. Ask not what God can do for you, but what you can do for God. In the words of the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, he would often say, Ich will nicht dein Gan Eden. I don't desire your heaven. Ich will nicht dein Elam Haba. I don't desire your future reward. Ich will mer nicht as dich allein. I desire only you alone. This was the motivation of the Alter Rebbe's spiritual divine service. I do it because of you, not because of what you could do for me. And as we sit around the Pesach Seder this year, and you might feel a little bit at a disadvantage because there are less people there than usual. Maybe there's nobody there other than yourself. And you'll feel, why am I doing this? Maybe you're all alone this year for the Pesach Seder. And you'd say to yourself, who needs this at all? This is an opportunity to be able to do something for Hashem himself without any ulterior motive. It's not for the children, it's not for the grandchildren, it's not because of the guests, it's not because of anything. It's only because of you and Hashem in a deep, beautiful, romantic relationship. That's what this is all about. And that was just a bit of an introduction to what we're going to be learning about right now, which is part 2 of the Pesach Crash Course. I'd like to welcome Winston from Jakarta, the area of Jakarta, Indonesia, Marty from Palm Beach Gardens, and Alicia from West Palm Beach. Good to see everybody. And Elaine also. Shalom and nice to see everybody. Okay, so let's get straight into today's section 2. If you missed part 1 of the Kosher Crash Course, of the Pesach Crash Course, you can review it at youtube.com/Jewish Gardens. That's youtube.com/Jewish Gardens. Feel free, please, to post your questions or comments right here in the chat box. And I'd love to interact and engage with you in this brief crash course. So let's go straight into the actual Seder. The Seder itself in the printed Haggadahs is made up of 15 simanim, which means signs or steps. These are actually recited at the very beginning of the Seder, and we recite them again as we reach each step of the Seder throughout the course of the evening. Let's go through the steps of the Seder now. First and foremost, we begin with candles. Women and girls have a special mitzvah to light the Shabbos and Yantiv candles on the first night. 2 blessings are recited. The first one is blessing the holiday itself. And the second blessing is Shehechiyanu v'kiyamanu v'yanu lizman hazeh, which is gratitude to Hashem for having given us the extraordinary opportunity of being able to be alive and experiencing this beautiful holiday that comes around only once a year. And this year especially, with all the loss of life that's been experienced throughout the world, throughout this pandemic, we all are so extra grateful knowing that the angel of death has been on a wild rampage this year throughout the world. No community, no family was spared. And the fact that we are still alive this year gives us extra gratitude. But bear in mind, you cannot light the candles on Shabbos. Lighting candles on Shabbos is a grave violation of Shabbos. Just like you cannot light the candles before Shabbos, the Friday night candles after sundown. Because once sun sets, it's already Shabbos, and it would be a violation of Shabbos to light the Shabbos candles, not a respect of the Shabbos. You have to light the candles before sundown, as advertised in the Chabad calendar. So too, this year on Pesach, which begins on a Saturday night, this Saturday night, you light the candles not on Shabbos, but you light the candles after Shabbos, which this year I believe is after 8:12 p.m. You have to wait until after Shabbos in order to light the Hanukkah candles. It's got to be after 8:12 p.m. So even if for whatever reason you have decided to begin your Seder before 8:12 p.m., please do not light your candles, your Yontif candles, before 8:12 p.m., which is the time when Shabbos comes out in Palm Beach Gardens. Passover is a Yontif. It is a major Jewish Yontif. It is one of the top 3 Jewish holidays known as the pilgrimage festivals. The reason they're called pilgrimage or Shalosh Regalim, the 3 legs, is because these 3 times a year was when the Jewish people were obligated to go up to Jerusalem, to appear in Jerusalem, and they were Passover, Sukkot, and the festival of Shavuos. And therefore, we sanctify this festival like a Shabbos, over a glass of wine. If need be, if you can't use wine for whatever reason, you are allowed to use grape juice, and all the participants should make their own kiddush. The cup for kiddush, and all the 4 cups that you drink during the Seder, the kiddush cup is the first of the 4 cups at the Seder, must have a minimum size. You cannot just have a cup of any size. It's got to be a kosher cup. It's got to be the right size. So what is the kosher size for a cup? It's got to be a minimum requirement of 3.2 ounces, of which you are obligated to drink at least 51%, which would be 51% of 3.2 ounces. I imagine that's just a little bit more than 1.6 ounces. So what that means is when you make kiddush, you can't just drink. I mean, look, one second. On a regular Friday night, there's no obligation to actually drink the wine yourself. You are technically able to exempt your obligation when the person making kiddush drinks their wine. But on Pesach, there is an obligation, a rabbinical obligation, for each participant to drink 4 cups of wine. You cannot fulfill that obligation through someone else drinking their wine. You have to drink your own cup of wine 4 times. How much is a cup of wine? 3.2 ounces. The minimum requirement of fulfilling your obligation is 51% of that cup of wine, which is why you have to drink at least a little bit more than 1.6 ounces each of the 4 cups of wine, including the kiddush at the beginning. It's customary to overflow the wine. When you pour the wine into the cup, you overflow the wine. What is the reason for that? Because as below, so above. The way that we initiate our relationship with God below is exactly the way that God reciprocates his relationship with us from above. And when we overflow and go above and beyond the call of duty for Hashem, then God does exactly the same for us. When we bless Hashem with overflowing cup, my cup runneth over, then God blesses us in exactly the same way with overflowing blessings. And we all know that we could use overflowing blessings for health and wealth and nachas and peace of mind and serenity and consciousness and all sorts of wonderful things that we can wish upon ourselves. We all wish and pray for overflowing blessings. Any questions or comments, please do feel free to insert them into the chat box here on YouTube or on Facebook. While drinking this cup of wine, the first cup of wine, as well as all the other 3 cups of wine, we all recline towards the left. We do this through most of the items through the Seder. And the reason we do this is because this is the way of nobility. They don't just sit like normal people in chairs. They actually lean They lean over like they're reclining on these I think it's called a chaise. That couch that you sort of lay on, it's called a chaise maybe. That's how people of royalty, apparently, that's how they dine, while laying on their side. We lay on the left and not on the right because it's got to do with the trachea and the esophagus, and the way that is more healthy for eating while reclining is laying on the left and not onto the right. Okay, so as mentioned, education is a key ingredient in the theme of the Passover Seder night. And therefore, we do a number of bizarre things in order to make the kids ask. The key here is inquisitiveness, just in order that the kids should ask why. And the next step of the Seder, which is right after Kiddush, after candle lighting and Kiddush, is urchat, which is the washing of the hands, in order to eat the vegetable, which is the third step of the Seder. Normally on a Shabbos or Yantiv, you'd be eating your full meal right now. After Kiddush, you go straight into the washing of the bread and you go eat your meal. But now we don't go straight into the meal of washing of the bread, washing of the matzah, and starting the meal. Instead, what we do at the Passover Seder is that we wash our hands over a vegetable. The karpas is any vegetable from the Seder plate, and we dip it into salt water. The salt water commemorates the tears of our enslaved ancestors. Before we eat this vegetable, we make a blessing on it, having in mind to fulfill our obligation for a blessing also on the maror, on the bitter herbs, which is also a vegetable, a little bit later on in the meal. And just before we make the blessing and eat the vegetable dipped in salt water, we wash our hands as if we wash for bread, but we do so without a blessing. Now, the reason that we do this, the reason that we wash our hands before the eating of the vegetable, harkens back to temple times, when the Jewish people would be conscious of their status of ritual purity. And not only would they eat their bread after a state of ritual purity, but they would even eat their wet vegetables in a state of ritual purity. And that's why today we also wash our hands before handling vegetables, to make sure that there's no ritual impurity on our hands. It's kind of like a miniature mikvah. Just like you'd go into a state of a mikveh. This really is the reason for the washing of the hands in general. The reason that we wash our hands for bread is because we want to make sure that we never forget that when Mashiach comes in temple times, certain foods need to be eaten in a state of ritual purity. You need to go to a mikveh before you eat certain foods. And that's why the most important food, which is bread, we want to make sure that we eat it in a state of purity. So we do a miniature mikvah, which is the washing of the hands. We also, today even, are supposed to wash our hands before eating a wet vegetable, because the wetness of the vegetable is also a conduit. The liquid is a conduit to transfer impurity from our hands, from our bodies, to the vegetable. And that's why you are supposed to wash your hands like you do for bread before eating a wet vegetable. It's not that common. We don't normally see it, and that's why it's going to arouse the inquisitiveness of the children. But the difference is, when we wash for bread, we make a blessing on the washing of the hands. When we eat a wet vegetable, we do not make a blessing. And that's why before the Seder, at the beginning of the Seder, before eating the karpas, the vegetable dipped in salt water, we do not make an actual blessing. We only wash our hands, and we are mindful not to make the blessing. And now this is going to drive the kids crazy. This is going to make the kids ask questions. And the idea here is to inspire the kids to ask questions. And it teaches us an important thing about education, is that when it comes to education, you got to get creative. When you want to relay a message to the youth, it doesn't require a hammer to force them to sit at attention and listen. But if you get creative, there are pleasant ways to get their attention. Also, we realize over here is that the key to learning is through inquisitiveness. Children need to be taught to ask questions. We could potentially just tell them the Pesach story, but then it might go in one ear and out the other. But when we involve them in the process, when we have them ask questions and we give them answers to their questions, or maybe we inspire them with asking questions to their questions, so that they themselves are able to come to the answers, now this is something that you know they're going to be engaged in, and something that they're going to be listening to. The Nobel Prize, that he owes gratitude to for having made him a Nobel Prize winner, is his mother, because every kid that came home from Seder, from school, at the end of the day, his mother would ask him, what did you learn today? Did you learn something today? Isidore Rabbi said when he came home from Seder, his mother would say to him, Isidore, did you ask a good question today? She didn't care if you learned anything today. All that she needed to know is if he asked a good question today, because asking a good question is what's going to ensure that he was going to be prepared for a life of learning. And this is something which is a very, very important point over here. It's a very important point because even if you're not having children at your Seder, these messages of education still have universal relevance. It is a real shame that as we mature, we tend to ask less questions and become less curious. I remember a developer in our community telling me that you should never be afraid to ask questions about construction. When we were building our shul, he said every developer will tell you that the best building that they ever built is the first building that they ever built, because when they built their first building, they asked a million questions. Why is this over here? How is that going to fit over there? Why are we doing this? Why are we not doing that? And the other, when you ask a million questions, you come to a lot of clarity, and that's how you make sure that you make no mistakes. It's later on when you feel like you know everything that now you don't ask any more questions, and that's when the mistakes happen. So it was very, very interesting to me to learn that from a developer. As Mickey often says over here, as Mickey, our president, often says, that the only dumb question is the one that you forgot to ask. So it's very, very important for us to be able to be inspired to ask questions. Pesach is the festival of education, which is celebrated through questions. It's the original Socratic method. It's not Socrates that gets the credit for learning through questions. It's really the Torah that has been doing this long before Socrates. That the way we do this is by asking questions. That's how we learn. It's how the whole Talmud is structured, on asking questions. And that's what we're celebrating on Pesach. So I want to encourage you, as you come into this Pesach Seder, to plan a list of questions, whether it's questions for your spouse, questions for your children and grandchildren, or questions for yourself. Maybe if you're sitting all by yourself this year for Pesach, maybe you want to have questions for God. And see if you can use those questions as a springboard for conversation that will lead you to greater depths that maybe you never knew that you were able to reach. Because that is the key to the Pesach Seder. That is the key to be able to grow, to learn, and to find the answers that we need to reach. Just one final point I want to share with you here. Nope, that's it. I'm going to call it a day over here, friends. We'll carry on and conclude the Pesach Crash Course tomorrow tomorrow morning at 8:30. Meanwhile, thank you very much for joining me this morning. I want to wish everybody a wonderful day. Don't forget to swing by the Chabad to pick up your Shmura Matzah so that you will have Shmura Matzah for your Seder, special handbaked Shmura Matzah we prepared for you. And also to sell your chametz. Don't forget to sell your chametz. Nobody's allowed to own any chametz during Pesach. You can do so online at jewishgardens.com/chametz. That's jewishgardens.com/chametz, CHAMETZ. I see Winston is asking a question. Even we forbid to eat meat from the zroas. It's forbidden to have roasted zroa for the Pesach meal. Winston, we do not have any roasted meat at the Pesach Seder. We definitely do not eat the zroa, which is on the top right of the Seder plate. It's a remembrance of the Paschal lamb sacrifice, which we do not have today because we don't have a temple. God willing, this year we will have a temple with the coming of Mashiach and the rebuilding of our temple. We'll be able to really have a Paschal sacrifice this week. But until then, we do not eat any roasted meat at the Pesach Seder, and certainly not the zroa, because we don't want to make it even look like we are eating anything which is of the Paschal sacrifice, which would be forbidden under these times. Hopefully that answers your question. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining me this morning. Shalom. And have a great day. Oh, no, I see Winston is asking another question. Good morning, Lawrence Morden. If zroa from chicken bone, is that okay to roast it before? Oh, I think that question disappeared. Okay, fine. Very good, guys. Have a wonderful day. Shalom and take care.